Today's date is October 20, 2020. We're conducting this meeting via Zoom video platform. It will both be recorded and transcribed by our stenographer. For the record and for all meeting participants and attendees, I will identify all council members first, and then I'll identify all CRMC staff that are on this Zoom call. First for the council members, when I call your name, just indicate that you're here, yes, whatever, so that people know who you are. I'll start with myself, Jennifer Cervenka, Chair, Raymond Koya, Vice Chair.
Ray Koya, present.
Thank you. Mike Hudner.
Mike Hudner, present.
Donald Gomez.
Don Gomez, present.
Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, present.
And Patricia Reynolds.
Patricia Reynolds, present.
Thank you. Those are all the council members. Now for CRMC staff, Jeffrey Willis, our Executive Director.
Jeff Willis, present.
James Boyd, our Acting Deputy Director.
Present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our Legal Counsel, John Longo.
Present.
Danny Goulet, our Senior Engineer.
Present.
Lisa Turner, our Recording Secretary.
Present.
Ryan Moore, our Moderator.
Present.
Thank you. Laura Dwyer, our Public Outreach Coordinator.
Present.
And finally, Cindy Tagney, our stenographer.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to, before we get into the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Ryan Moore, who's going to go through the rules and protocols for this evening's Zoom meeting. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to this Rhode Island Coastal Resource Management Council virtual semi-monthly meeting, October 20, 2020, conducted in accordance with the Executive Order 20-75, 58 Emergency Declaration, Extension of Executive Orders. If you're having problems with your computer audio, please use this number for the meeting. The number is 1-646-558-8656. The meeting ID and password are posted here, and they will also be posted in the chat box once I'm done with this presentation. Please be advised that this online meeting, including all audio, video, and names and comments visible in the chat box, are being recorded. All members of the public who wish to comment during these proceedings must correctly identify themselves before proceeding. Council members, applicants, and CRMC staff, turn video on. Do not use phones or computer audio at the same time. Raise your hand or use the raise hand button to be recognized by the chair. Identify yourself by name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Turn your video, members of the public, please turn your videos off. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Wait to be recognized by the chair and unmuted by the moderator to speak. Identify yourself by name. Those on the phone, please press *9 to use the raise hand function. When recognized, identify yourself by name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. That is it. I will turn it back over to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, going to our minutes from our prior meeting, which was October 13th, 2020. Those meeting minutes were circulated. If you'd review them, I'd entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the minutes as recorded.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Is there a second?
Second, Mike Hudner.
Thank you, Mr. Hudner. Any discussion? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call for the pending motion to approve the October 13, 2020 minutes. Raymond Koya.
Madam Chair, I'm abstaining. I was absent that meeting, so I'm assuming they're accurate, but I can't vote on it.
You'd be correct. Thank you. Mike Hudner,
Approved. Hudner.
Okay. Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The October 13, 2020 meeting minutes are approved. Moving on to subcommittee and staff reports. Jeff, I know that you used to do the subcommittee reports when you were the deputy director. So is Jim now doing the subcommittee reports and you're doing the staff reports, or do you do both?
No, Jim is more than capable of reporting on the subcommittee.
Okay.
However, there has been no
Nothing to report.
subcommittees. Right, so we'll start that up for next meeting.
Okay, great. Do you have anything to report? I'm sure you do, Mr. Willis.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have one item to report on. At the last meeting, we mentioned that the Fisheries Advisory Board under the Ocean SAMP requirements that we are working on with Orsted's South Fork Wind Farm Development Team. The FAB meeting had been set up for this Thursday, but that meeting has been moved to next Thursday. So we will begin to meet with the FAB, with staff, with the South Fork Wind Development Team to meet the enforceable policies of the Ocean SAMP on the mitigation program that Orsted has proposed. So to the council for the FAB to consider. Those meetings will start next week. We probably will need 2, if not 3 meetings, but I just wanted to let the council know that the first meeting has been moved to next week rather than this week. That's all, Madam Chair.
And we're in a good position at this point. We have plenty of time to move through this before the deadline would be up in January, correct?
Plenty, yes, we have time. We would hope that we can have these negotiations accomplished in the next couple of weeks. That is our goal. I'll probably be in a better position to report on that after the first meeting, but assuming that we can work on these negotiations in the next couple of weeks, staff will be working very hard to get you all a recommendation ahead of the end of January's deadline for our decision.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Any questions for Mr. Willis on his report out? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move to our one application that we have scheduled for tonight. This is a special meeting for the sole purpose really of considering 2019-06-014, the Jamestown Boatyard proposed project for extension of the piers and dredging. So before we get into it, the way that it's going to be organized is that we'll have first Mr. Goulet, who's our senior staff engineer, go through his written report that he's prepared upon his review of the project materials and give his findings and his recommendation. Then we will move to have the applicant present however it sees fit, followed by any objectors who are represented by counsel. And then following that, we'll ask for a show of virtual hands, so to speak, of those outside of that group that still wish to comment in the public comment portion. And then we'll take a break. We'll figure out how much time each member of the public will receive. We want to finish this in a 3-hour period. We might have to continue it. I'd like to finish it, so I'd like to be efficient. I'd like to eliminate duplicative testimony, but I'd also like to give everyone a chance to speak, as to their personal knowledge and their opinions if they want. So with that, I'd like to do a roll call first of the applicant, being counsel and any witnesses, and then I'll turn to objectors represented by counsel. And again, after those two groups go, then we'll do a roll call of the public. So if I can first hear from the applicant's counsel, who can then identify who he will be calling as witnesses. And I think you would have to indicate to Ryan to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. I'm Christian Infantolino with Morneau and Murphy. I also have Joe DeAngelis with me. We represent the applicant, Jamestown Safe Harbor. We are all actually here tonight in one room. And tonight we are going to put on, we're only going to have one witness. We're going to have the general manager, Steve DeVoe, and we're going to leave the objector's testimony and open for rebuttals to said testimony.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just writing this down. So
Sure.
it's the two of you and Joe DeAngelis, and then Steve DeVoe, who is the what?
I have Steve DeVoe. He's the general manager
Okay.
with Safe Harbor of Jamestown.
Okay.
We do have Devin Santa and Matthew Rakowski with Race Engineering. They are here as well if there's any engineering questions from the council at board. But we're not putting them up as experts right now.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Now I'll turn to the any objectors that are represented by counsel. Mr. Shea, I know you're out there somewhere.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
I can.
I will be representing Ocean Highlands LLC and the Dumplings Association. We will present two expert witnesses who have been previously disclosed, a Dr. Susan Kane Driscoll, a marine toxicologist, and Dr. Marie-Helene Cormier, a marine geophysicist. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's it for your witnesses,
I
Mr. Shea?
will be presenting our position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and then Bill Landry, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. William Landry, Bush and Kavanaugh, 30 Exchange Terrace, Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm representing Friends of Dumplings Cove. That's an entity, a small entity that's been involved in promoting the interests of the Cove. We have no witnesses. I have no witnesses to call per se, but we are aware that there are a number of people from the general public in the town of Jamestown and its surrounds that do wish to be recognized during the public comment portion of this procedure. And in order to try to make that efficient, we did have over 500 people sign a petition, and we did not want to have 500 people trying to compete with each other to get on into this meeting. We didn't think that would be good for us or for the commission. So we don't control who on the public wants to speak, but we did make an effort to have at least a number of people focused just on the issues before the council and to try to keep their comments to 1 or 2 minutes. And we have provided a list of those individuals to Ms. Turner together with their numbers and email addresses. Our hope is that those folks are recognized, but again, we are certainly not controlling or dictating the public comment portion of these proceedings, but we would like those people to be heard.
Okay, that is the 4-page document with 25 individuals.
Yes, I believe there are 26. An updated version provided today with 26.
Okay, all right. I don't have that before me, but we get the idea. Okay, so those are individuals that you would like to have recognized during the public comment period, correct?
Correct. They're not expert witnesses. They're people who will speak from, as I understand it, their own personal observations and experiences.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other attorneys representing objectors who will be presenting? Ryan, anyone identifying themselves?
We have, how many do we have on the list?
16.
We have 16 on the list wishing to speak, Madam Chair.
Oh, are you talking about the, during the public comment period?
Yes.
Okay, but no other attorneys? You're talking 16 people, right? Not 16 attorneys?
No, no other attorneys, Madam Chair.
Okay, great, thanks. Like I said, once we get through the applicant and Mr. Shea's presentations, then we'll take a break. We'll affirm that we still have 16. I don't know if that's 16 in addition to Mr. Landry's 26, but we'll figure it out then. But let's get started then with Mr. Goulet's staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project had many significant changes over the course of its review. It's had 2 public notices, with one of them being extended. First public notice was issued on June 25th, 2019, and that was extended for 15 days. The second notice was on September 3rd, 2019. Proposal before the council tonight is significantly changed from the original proposal. The original application was a Category B due to the change in the marina perimeter limit. The application before the council tonight is a Category A for the dredging, and the piers fall under the marina maintenance program. The proposal has been reduced to the extension of 3 existing piers. 2 of them will be extended 18 feet, and 1 of them will be extended 20 feet. The pier extensions will be within the existing approved marina perimeter limit. The proposal will also include approximately 2,000 cubic yards of improvement dredging with CAD cell disposal of the material. The application has been reduced to the work being within the marina perimeter limit for the docks, and the eelgrass has been avoided. The dredging footprint was confined to the marina perimeter limit with the exception of the approach, which is required by the water quality program and the Red Book to ensure that the area has proper flushing. The staff biologist worked with the engineering staff during the review, and once these parameters were met, the program was determined that these activities will have negligible impacts. As I mentioned, this current proposal is a significant reduction. The original proposal had 2 piers extending 146 feet and 105 feet, and another extending 150 feet with 2 new 50-foot long fingers. The original proposal would have required an expanded marina perimeter limit, as well as the dredging volume of approximately 3,500 cubic yards. The original proposal created concerns in the earliest stages of the review, since the approved dredge material sampling plan noted that DEM was fine with the sample locations, but had some concerns with the design of the proposal. The CRMC staff report also notes that the staff had similar concerns that the original proposal was too large for the stated purpose. The CRMC required the applicant to demonstrate that what they were proposing was the minimum necessary to meet the project's stated goal. This request and discussions with the applicant's consultants triggered various revisions that reduced the footprint to the current proposal, which staff agrees meets the stated goal of allowing larger vessels to be at the dock for service rather than require the service to be performed at the mooring. The proposal has received its DEM dredge permit, which includes its water quality certificate, which is a prerequisite for the ride cramp. The characterization of the sediment is included in the DEM water quality certificate, review, but for the council's indulgence, I will give you a quick synopsis of what that process is. There's a sample plan approval form in which the CRMC is the final signature. The scope and approval of this is done collaboratively between the agencies. On this sample plan, there's a note by DEM environmental scientist Neil Personius that specifically states, "I am fine with the sampling locations, but have some concerns with the design, which I previously explained. All sediment sampling and testing must meet the standard suite of chemical analysis. These analysis parameters are outlined in Appendix D of the DEM dredge rules, as well as being on the sample form. The results are included with the application and used by the agencies to determine the potential for beneficial reuse of the material or its disposal options. The DEM uses this along with other application data as part of its water quality review. The sediments are tested for the dredging aspect of this application, were reviewed against the DEM standards and found to be compliant with the dredge regulations and therefore received its dredge permit. All of the samples that the applicant analyzed are well below the residential direct exposure criteria. The objectors also took samples, although they were not within the dredge footprint, they were nearby. All the objector samples came back with levels that are also well below the residential direct exposure criteria. There are some differences between the two sets of samples since they're not taken in the same location. A couple of examples of this are lead, which had results of 7.3 and 6.4 from the proposed dredge footprint and 59 from a site nearby taken by the objectors. However, the DEM residential criteria number for lead is 150. Another example is copper, which had 4.6 and 6.2 from the dredge footprint and 56 nearby, but the DEM standard is 3,100. The objectors also sampled for a historic marine anti-fouling chemical called tributyl tin, or TBT, that is no longer used, but was likely used on vessels that used this facility in the past. There are no state standards for TBT, nor is it a required test for dredging. The only marine sediment criteria that staff could find is published by the Corps of Engineers EPA Region 10, the Seattle, Washington area, in their dredge material evaluation and disposal criteria procedures. In section 8.4.1, tributyl tin, they have a standard for bulk sediment that would require bioaccumulation testing. That standard is 73 micrograms per kilogram. The objectors tested for tributyl tin, had 4 tests that none detected, and 2 others, one had 16 micrograms per kilogram, and there was a laboratory spike of 24 micrograms per kilogram. These results would not have triggered further evaluation under the EPA standards. Getting back to the matter at hand, the dredging for this project will be limited to a time of year restriction that all dredge projects have, which is October 15th through January 31st. The dredging will be limited to mechanical methods, typically done with a clamshell, and loaded into a bottom dump scow. The bucket used for the dredging is required to be a closed environmental bucket to limit turbidity, which is a standard in the DEM water quality certificate. The dredge footprint avoids the eelgrass, but the DEM has stipulations that will be mirrored in the CRMC stipulations that require the eelgrass edge to be marked on the dredging computer to ensure that the operator avoids the area. There will also be a standard stipulation in the CRMC, should the council decide to approve, that does not allow any spudding or anchoring of equipment in the eelgrass beds. The DEM also requires the shellfish to be removed from the dredge footprint prior to dredging to avoid any loss of shellfish. Staff finds the current application meets the standards of the RICRAM and approval is recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Goulet. Are there any questions from council members on Mr. Goulet's report? Mr. Gagnon.
Yep. Mr. Goulet, could you just indicate about the approximate time it will take to do the dredging, like a week or 2 weeks or a month, what the how much time this is anticipated to?
Yeah, so it's 3, 6. It will take approximately 2 weeks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Goulet, could you address the role of Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management versus the CRMC on this project? Like, do we independently review determinations of the DEM or not?
We do not individually review their determination. The DEM is the state's experts for the marine sediment. Our review is so we take their opinion. Our review for the sediment is really the beneficial reuse potential for it. What can we not do? Can we or can we not do? And the practical nature of the actual dredging proposal itself. But the sediment determination is made by DEM, and we accept that.
Okay, and that's that it does not exceed the residential direct exposure criteria. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Well, also that it does not meet the beach nourishment criteria. Therefore, its reuse potential is we couldn't reuse it on a beach.
Okay. The changes that the applicant made over time, was that a result of both RIDEM and CRMC indicating there to be some issues with the extent of it? Was it as a result of objectors and taking their concerns into consideration, or both?
It was all of the above, as well as there was also a local process, the town of Jamestown, and so all of those together really combined. There's also the Army Corps of Engineers is also reviewing it. They also had concerns. Basically, we were trying to, the applicant had a stated goal for the application, and we were working with them to try and minimize it to meet that goal.
Okay. And as it is submitted now or is being considered tonight, it's essentially a maintenance application. Is that what you reported?
Yes. So if the application came in the door like it is before the council tonight, because the dock extensions are within they're extensions of existing piers, and they're within the existing approved marina perimeter limit, that would fall under our existing marina maintenance program, and it would not have gone out to public notice. The dredging, however, is a category A, and DEM requires that to be publicly noticed. So we typically joint public notice that. And so we did, so that would be a category A. That would not also would not go before the council. That would have been handled administratively, assuming that nothing came out of the sediment testing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Goulet? Okay, seeing anything further, Mr. Goulet, before I turn it over to the applicant's counsel? No,
that's it, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Infantolino.
Well done. Thank you very much.
I'm going to just call you Christian.
That's quite all right. I'm fine with that as well. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Christian Infantolino. I am with Morneau and Murphy, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant for this matter. Tonight, we do have Joe DeAngelis with me with Adler, Pollock, and Sheehan, as well as Steve DeVoe, the general manager of Safe Harbor, Jamestown, on standby.
And Kelsey, could I ask that you just turn on your video so
Oh,
whoever—
surely.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it kind of helps focus.
I completely understand. Let's see.
Thank
You
you.
cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay. Ryan, can you correct that?
Okay. There we go.
Perfect. Great.
All right. So let's see. All right, so yes, I have myself, Joe DeAngelis, as well as Steve DeVoe, the general manager of Jamestown Safe Harbor. And on the side for our engineers, we have Devin Santa and Matt Rakowski with Race Engineering. First, I'd like to say that we do agree with the staff report and all the conditions that were laid out within it. As was just mentioned by Mr. Goulet, this application would normally be handled administratively. However, due to some modifications and some changes, we are here tonight before the full board. This boatyard's been in its current location for over 100 years, and today the boatyard is operating with all of its permits currently in place, no zoning violations or no violations underneath any of its permits. The applicants have received a water quality permit from DEM, as well as the general permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. And as you just heard, the staff is recommending approval this evening. The first thing I'd like to do is have Mr. DeVoe give just a brief explanation of why this project. Why are we doing it? What's the business looking to accomplish, and how we can do that? I don't think this application really speaks to that other than its purpose, but you get it from Mr. DeVoe on the why. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Steve DeVoe. He's here with me. I'm just going to turn the machine here. Got it.
Hello, Mr. DeVoe.
Good evening.
Madam Chair, shall I swear him in?
I think so, yes.
Sir, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and just state your name once more for the record, please.
Stephen DeVoe.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we're getting this to the point that we can get a decision. As the application states, the purpose of this permit and work is to increase operational efficiency for the boatyard. Jamestown Boatyard was started back in 1904. We've operated as a small boatyard since that time. We employ 23 people. We are a working boatyard. We do not have any slips. We do have 81 moorings granted by the town. As a working boatyard, our livelihood depends upon generating income by fixing people's yachts. The source of that is both the 81 boats that are in the mooring, in addition to the 120 boats that we store upland during the winter, some of which are the same people that are on the moorings. However, we do have people coming from Massachusetts and as far west as west and south as Maryland, that we do call our customers that stop in to visit us when they need something done. In addition to that, a number of yachts that traverse New England to the Caribbean come in to get service both in the spring and in the fall prior to their departure for the Caribbean. In our current condition, we cannot keep the majority of boats that we service on the dock during a tide cycle. And what that condition causes is that the boats are parked in the mooring field and have to be brought in on the appropriate tide, worked on, and have to be removed depending upon the depth of the vessel sometime before mean low water. That creates both operational inefficiency and some traffic in the area in which we exist. So the idea is to allow us to bring a boat to the mooring, and if it has to be worked on for 3 days to accomplish whatever it is the customer wants us to do, the boat will be able to stay at the dock through the tide cycle. We can bring it in once, work on it, and bring it back to the mooring, which is where it lives, or have the customer come pick it up. That is the sole purpose of what we're trying to do. Christian?
Steve, do you intend to have any increase in traffic in the area?
No. The idea of this is to minimize the amount of traffic because we will not have to shuttle boats from the 6 working slips to the mooring, depending upon the tide cycle.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. So I guess with Steve's giving you the why at this point in time, I think the last thing I'd like to do is just reserve a right that we could have to call a rebuttal witness or to ask any questions of the witnesses that the objectors put forth before us. Other than that, I would turn the floor over to the objectors.
I just have a question about the boats that would then be brought in that could be kept to be worked on through the tide cycle. How many boats can be worked on through the tide cycle under your proposed project?
There are 6 working slips. One of those working slips includes our launch, which shuttles back and forth from the dock to the mooring field. So I would think we might have 6 boats altogether that we might be working on throughout the tide cycle.
Okay. And just the current conditions would be that you could bring in all 6 boats, but then you'd have to get them back out?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, that's not 100% correct, in that if the boat draws 5 feet, it can stay there during the tide cycle, but the overwhelming majority of boats that get worked on draw more than 5 feet, more in the area of 8 feet. And right now, we only have 1 slip that can accommodate that, but unfortunately, if that boat had to move 2 hours on either side of mean low water, it would be floating in the slip, but it couldn't get out of the slip. So
Okay.
that's our limitation.
And just for purposes of contrast, under your original application, what were you trying to accomplish with that compared to what you're describing now?
Well, we usually have a backlog that goes out during the summer in mechanical work to 2 or 3 weeks. So there are times during the summer where we could be working on more boats than the current configuration allows. And the proposed original configuration would have let us bring in 4 more boats to the 6 boats. So that was the purpose of the original application, to allow us to work on more boats at the same time, not have customers waiting for 2 weeks to get their boat fixed.
Okay. And is this going to, would under any scenario, would this, if approved, would it allow for bigger boats to come in to get worked on? I know that was one of the concerns or criticisms. How do you answer that?
Right now, the mooring field has boats anywhere from 20 feet to 68 feet. In today's, we are 95% sailboats. In today's world, anything larger than 50 feet usually goes down more than 10 feet. So I will not be able to work on that boat through the tide cycle. The majority of our boats that we currently work on would be able, with a 10-foot minimum at low water, would be able to stay on our docks. But the size of our facility, the size of our crew, the current customer base that we deal with falls in the 30 to 50 foot range with few outliers. So no, I don't envision us working on bigger boats.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. DeVoe from council members? Okay, I think you're done for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again. I'll reiterate, but just reserve our right to call any rebuttal witnesses if needed throughout this process.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now I'll then turn it over to Attorney Shea. Again, if you could turn on your video, Mr. Shea, and then any of the witnesses' videos for the two that you're presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There it is. Okay. Let's shut up. Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, honorable members of the council. My name is Justin Shea, and I'm here with Joseph Galindo, an attorney in my office, which is Cameron and Middleman LLP, with offices located at 301 Promenade Street in Providence, 02908. We represent the Dumplings Association and Ocean Highlands LLC, both of which are direct abutters of Safe Harbor Jamestown Boatyard. The Dumplings Association owns contiguous property to the south of the boatyard, and Ocean Highlands owns contiguous property directly to the north of the boatyard. The Dumplings Association is a nonprofit neighborhood association to which approximately 125 families are members. It is dedicated to low-intensity recreational activities in the Dumplings area, such as swimming, boating, snorkeling, windsurfing, things of that nature. And it is directly next to the boatyard. We have made a number of submissions to the council on behalf of our clients. And we hope that the council has had the chance, or if not, will take the chance to review these submissions prior to acting on this application. We will also be presenting evidence of two experts, Dr. Susan Kane Driscoll, a marine toxicologist, and Dr. Marie-Helene Cormier, a marine geophysicist. What is most remarkable about this application is not what is contained in it, but what is missing from it. The first issue I'd like to discuss before the council is the issue of the property line to the north property line of the boatyard itself. We have alerted the council to a property ownership issue about which there has been no reply in the application. To our knowledge, no revised plan has been added to the boatyard file showing that the land under the dock to the north near the shoreline is actually owned by the boatyard, not by Ocean Highlands LLC. The boatyard's 2020 revised property survey is not an adequate replacement for the site plan because it is not based on the surveyor's own work. Instead, it is based on the surveyor's acquiescence to a property line shown on a 1998 survey that was long ago rejected for being of questionable accuracy. The location of this property line is related to the question of how legitimate existing perimeter limit is. This perimeter limit was created in 1993 based on that northwest property line that intruded so far onto the neighbor's land without the neighbor's knowledge that no one today would consider that line even close to accurate. If the northwest property line at mean high water is on the southeast side of the boatyard dock, as the site plan submitted with this application shows, then that could also further call into question the legitimacy of the current perimeter permit, marina perimeter permit, as well as the proposed extension of the most northwesterly of the three existing floating docks. Of course, setback and consent requirements are another issue. This application should not be determined until this issue is determined once and for all. We have submitted on behalf of our clients a number of direct objections to the application itself. The Dumplings Association has responded to the policy analyst report on this subject, making a strong case that much of the east coast of Jamestown is not correctly classified. The Red Book quite clearly defines water types according to what exists along the adjacent shorelines. There is no question here that the vast majority of the shoreline at issue is either residential or natural habitat area. Defining type 3 water simply by the presence of a large mooring field does not make sense. For one thing, this definition is not what is found in the Red Book. That looks seaward as opposed to landward, as the Red Book requires. It is also part of this council's mission to protect residential and natural habitat shorelines from excessive commercial development in their adjacent waters. This shoreline is undeniably residential and natural habitat, therefore meriting protection by this council. Additionally, this application is based on a lack of zoning board of approval for this alteration to a non-conforming use. Alterations to a non-conforming use require board of review approval unless the alteration makes the use less non-conforming. The boatyard is proposing to undertake dredging and dock expansion that will accommodate larger, deeper draft boats up to 70 feet in length. That's a significant alteration when the majority of the current Jamestown boatyard customers have much smaller boats. And we direct the council to Exhibit A of our submission from several weeks ago. It's true that in March of 2019, this requirement for zoning board approval was waived, but nothing in the Jamestown zoning ordinance gives this waiver legitimacy. To be in conformity with the ordinance, hence CRMC regulations, zoning board of review approval should be applied for and obtained before this application is acted upon. There are other municipal requirements that the applicant is not in compliance with. For instance, adequate off-street parking for 66 to 67 cars by our calculation, with the boatyard having slips or moorings for 100 boats, is a requirement for a Jamestown marina. One parking spot for every 1.5 boats. The overflow, but this requirement of the zoning ordinance has never been met. The overflow of customer cars along the street in the summer creates problems of traffic congestion in the area. The boatyard is still not in compliance with the zoning board of review special use permit issued to it in 2016 for construction of 2 new buildings. The abutting neighbors agreed not to oppose this new construction if the buildings met certain conditions. And we would please direct your attention to Appendix B to our submissions, indicating the conditions of this special use permit that were ignored. The non-compliance issue that was most disturbing to the neighbors was the excessive height of the biggest building because its roof intrudes into some of the neighbors' views of the water. Additionally, the boatyard has spilled over onto town land, which is part of a road right-of-way, which it rents for boat storage. This creates a gravely unsafe traffic situation on a significantly narrow road, particularly when cars are parked along it. The application has also failed to address conflict with the low-intensity uses of these neighboring waters. Low-intensity recreational uses have been going on for generations in these waters, long before the initial creation of the boatyard here. Today, there's an extensive amount of swimming, kayaking, paddling, paddle boarding, snorkeling, etc., that occur in this area. Introducing even larger boats into these waters would likely create a significant safety issue, especially when many of these larger boats may be transients unfamiliar with these waters and how they are used. Moreover, the east-facing channel proposed to be dredged to enable larger boat access to the boatyard docks extends directly in front of the neighborhood swimming dock into what would normally be considered the neighborhood's riparian waters. There has also been a failure to address the dredging's potential effects on nearby eelgrass beds. The eelgrass beds in this area are extensive, as the state eelgrass survey map shows. The boatyard's submerged aquatic vegetation survey shows only a small portion of the eelgrass meadows that are here. There is no question that dredging can pose risks to nearby eelgrass beds. The Army Corps of Engineers refers to these risks as the 3 R's of dredging: resuspended sediment, which can block out light to plants; residual sediment, which is resuspended sediment that settles out of the water column and potentially onto eelgrass plants; and released contaminants, which can introduce toxins to marine life. The lab analysis of sediment in the proposed east-facing channel to be dredged shows it to consist of small, silt and clay-sized particles that can easily be carried by wind and tide toward the nearby eelgrass beds. This makes plants much more susceptible to hydrogen sulfide intrusion, which is toxic to them. This application, at the very least, should have a biologist report addressing these important issues relating to protecting eelgrass beds. The town of Jamestown has sent to CRMC a letter of opposition to this applicant's proposal, partly out of concern for eelgrass and marine life protection, as has the town's Conservation Commission. A list of academic papers on this subject is also included in the document summarizing our objections to this proposal. In addition, there is the marine chemistry issue regarding the fate of toxins contained in some of the sediment proposed to be dredged. In the area of the boatyard dock, this includes the highly toxic biocide TBT, a widely used additive in boat bottom paints until it was banned. Dredging can release these toxins, which can then be carried by wind and tide. At the very least, the full extent of TBC's presence in this sediment should be known before assent for dredging is given here. Additionally, the application fails to address the maintenance dredging schedule that would be required here. A maintenance dredging assessment is a Red Book requirement. It is especially important to meet this requirement in this particular location because local observation over many years suggests that the necessary schedule of maintenance dredging might be unusually frequent due to the significant mobility of the sediment in the area. This could put nearby eelgrass beds at repeated risk. Additionally, the application fails to address the adverse scenic impact of this proposal. Dumplings Cove is a uniquely scenic part of Rhode Island that merits protection from continual commercial development and related activities such as dredging. The northeastern side of Bull Point, in particular, is a scenic area enjoyed by a great many Rhode Islanders because of its natural beauty and undeveloped shoreline. These prized traits should not be jeopardized by over-commercial development of the waters. At this time, Madam Chair, if I may, I would like to introduce to the council two experts that the abutters would like to present. First, Dr. Susan Kane Driscoll, a marine toxicologist, and then Dr. Marie Elaine Cormier, a marine geophysicist, who will comment on and elaborate on some of the points we have made. We have previously filed with CRMC an extensive curriculum vitae for each of these experts. They are quite long as well as quite impressive. Rather than go through them, I would just ask each of them as they take their turn to present a short rendition of their experience in education. And if we may, I would ask the moderator to see if we can gain entry for Dr. Driscoll, the marine toxicologist, if we may.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Ryan, would you be able to do that?
Madam Chair, while he's doing that, may I make a comment?
Okay.
You know, the first thing I just wanted to say is that these are opening remarks. They do need to be proved by expert testimony, and the board and council shouldn't take these remarks as truths. There were a lot of the water types that he's mentioning. The applicant gets the benefit of the water type as the date of the application. The zoning issues that the applicant, that the objector's trying to bring up, these are non-jurisdictional issues by the CRMC. The applicant has no zoning violations, no issues whatsoever. And the property line issue that he's attempting to address. You know, this is an issue where this dock has been in place for well over 100 years. And if there was actually a property line in, you know, in opposition, we'd have a case filed against it for that. You know, we're not applying for a dock. We're applying for, it's really, really simple. We're applying for a few fingers and a very small amount of dredging, which for the most part would have been an administrative application.
Okay, thank you. You will have time to respond, you know, after Mr. Shea presents his full argument and witnesses. I do have some comments on some of the arguments that were made, and I think we understand that at this point they are arguments, and he's going to attempt to put on some expert testimony. So let's let him present, and then you can come back and respond.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have your witness, Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Oh, there, yes, I see her. Okay.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
here. Hi, I'm Susan Kane Driscoll. I am an aquatic toxicologist, proud graduate
Mr.
of.
Driscoll, let me swear you in first, okay?
Okay, sure.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I was saying I'm an aquatic toxicologist, a proud graduate of the University of Rhode Island with a PhD in environmental sciences from University of Massachusetts at Boston. I've worked for about 25 years in the world of environmental risk assessment with a specialty in sediment toxicology. So I've been asked tonight to talk about the results of the sampling and analysis of sediment in the area of the proposed dredging and the potential for contaminants in the dredged sediment to cause adverse effects on aquatic organisms. It's my understanding that 2 samples of sediment were collected at the request of the Dumplings Association in May and June of this year. And one of those samples, denoted as SW5, was collected from the top 3 feet of sediment in the area adjacent to the boatyard dock. And that sample was analyzed for various organic contaminants and metals, including tributyl tin, which is abbreviated TBT. Now, TBT is of concern for a number of reasons. As was mentioned, it's highly toxic biocide that I think many of you know was used extensively in anti-fouling paints to protect the hulls of ships and boats. And TBT is a problem in the aquatic environment because it's also extremely toxic to non-target organisms, such as snails and bivalve. It can readily absorb onto organic rich sediments where it can be very persistent with a reported half-life, which is the time it would take a concentration to decrease by about 50% on the order of years to decades in sediments with low levels of oxygen. So undisturbed sediments can act as a reservoir of slow release of TBT, but TBT can also be released into the water column rapidly when sediments are resuspended, as occurs during dredging. TBT was identified as a prime example of an endocrine disrupting chemical that causes clear environmental impacts. TBT interferes with the metabolism of hormones, which results in sex change characteristics and immunosuppression in snails and bivalves. In particular, the change of female dog whelks into male, which is called imposex, was first reported in the 70s and was later shown to be caused by TBT that had leached from treated boat hulls or scoured off in flakes during repainting. In severe cases, exposure to TBT has been shown to cause the extinction of local population of dog whelks. Because like many other species of snails and clams, the dog's whelk does not produce larvae that float in the water column, repopulation from nearby populations is limited. And note that dog whelks are a very common species on rocky areas of the Northeast Atlantic, including Jamestown, and a common prey item of crabs and birds. More broadly, it's been estimated that about 150 species of snails have been adversely affected worldwide, and that TBT has also caused serious problems for the mariculture industry in several countries. So most of these highly undesirable effects were known by the mid-1980s, and they led to two phases of regulatory action. Initially, it was hoped that restricting use of TBT on smaller boats would provide sufficient risk management on the grounds that such small boats are more common in shallow waters, which would provide the least amount of dilution of TBT leachate from boats. But continued environmental monitoring showed that TBT from larger vessels was also causing problems. So a global ban affecting all shipping was eventually arranged through the International Maritime Organization. And this ban came in effect in 2003 for new application of TBT paint, with a final deadline of 2008 for complete removal of TBT from ship hulls. The US EPA developed a national ambient water quality criteria for TBT in 2003. EPA reviewed all of the available data on the toxicity of TBT to aquatic species, including impacts to commercially important species such as oysters, clams, quahogs, and the dog whelk. EPA especially considered significant adverse effects on reproduction of these species, which are related to the long-term survival of these organisms. They developed a national ambient water quality criteria of 7.4 nanograms TBT per liter of water, or parts per trillion. This criterion is intended to protect saltwater aquatic life from these chronic toxic effects. The water concentration of TBT can be converted to a corresponding sediment concentration if data on the organic carbon content of the sediment is available, because these hydrophobic contaminants absorb to organic carbon in the sediment. Unfortunately, data on organic carbon content was not collected in the one sample that was collected at the boat dock and analyzed for TBT. Now, the measured concentration of TBT in that sample near the boat dock, as I said, was 16 micrograms per kilogram, or 16 parts per billion in sediment. Given this measured concentration of TBT in sediment, if that sample had a organic carbon content of about 6.5%, which is a reasonable expectation for this sample, which we do know consisted of about 80% sand, we can predict that this concentration of TBT would be above levels considered by US EPA to be protective of species like clams, oysters, and snails. I'm not familiar with a sediment quality criteria that was mentioned earlier by the CRMC staff report person that was developed by, I believe he said that it was Region 10, so the Pacific Northwest Division of the Army Corps of Engineers. I think he said it was 73 parts per billion. But I would say that any criterion should be based and modified by the organic carbon content of the sediment. And that's the best and most appropriate way to assess the potential toxicity. And without that information for these particular sediments, we're not able to make a reasonable prediction of whether or not these samples would be toxic. In addition, considering that the sediment sample that was collected and analyzed for TBT that had a concentration of 16 parts per billion was collected from the top 3 feet of sediment, which is a fairly deep core, this likely contains older, less contaminated sediments, which may have diluted the concentration in the reported sample. So the concentration of TBT at certain sediment depths, for example, in the top 2 feet, could be even greater than 16 parts per billion. So in conclusion, after a review of the data from this site, I think that the concentration of TBT in the dredge area is high enough to be of concern and could be high enough to impact reproduction of sensitive species, and more data should be collected, especially for TBT as well as sediment organic carbon in those sediment samples to make better predictions about the potential for adverse effects of TBT associated with the proposed dredging project. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, are you asking your witness any questions, or is it open to council members?
We will stand on Dr. Driscoll's statement, and should any of the council members wish to inquire, delighted to have them do so.
Or anyone want to ask the expert on her conclusions? Anything that she talked about on standards? I'd like to bring it back to Mr. Goulet to address that. But before doing that, if you have any questions, please ask them now.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gomez.
just the only thing, I followed along with this, but the conclusion was that the toxins could be higher than the limits allowed. The words "could be" bother me, and do we have any kind of a probability on that? Is it 10% could be, or is it 90% could be? Is there something that would quantify that assessment more? Would be my concern.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
So without having the data of the organic carbon content of the sediment, it's difficult to put a probability on that. It's really a data gap that exists in order to be able to make that, give you a greater probability of if it would or could.
All right. Thank you for the answer. That's pretty much what I had thought.
Thank you. Mr. Goulet, can you address whether or not you believe there is a data gap that affects your findings and conclusions?
Madam Chair, I would have to defer to the DEN. They are the state sediment experts. However, the only marine sediment standard that we could find was from, and the doctor is correct, it was Region 10 of the Corps of Engineers, EPA, and it specifically for bulk sediment, and their standard is 73 parts per billion, and that is a trigger point for bioaccumulation. So similar to what the doctor's saying, that it would require more study. I think that the EPA says the same thing. However, our finding of sediment at 16 is well below that trigger for more study.
I would just ask if that 73 parts per billion, sometimes when they express those numbers, they express them 73 parts per billion if it's 10% organic carbon. And so if you knew the organic carbon of your particular sediment, you would modify that number based on the site-specific organic carbon. So maybe if I could get that reference from you after the fact, I could just look and see if there's any adjustment to it based on organic carbon.
Sure, I'm happy to give it to you right now.
Okay,
It's,
great.
The EPA, it's the Region 10 Dredge Material Evaluation and Disposal Procedures, and it's section 8.4.1, specifically tributyl tin. I would also like to add, Madam Chair, that there are no state standards for tributyl tin. It's not typically a constituent that we evaluate for unless there's a specific concern, like in some of the Navy piers is where we where it's been sampled before.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shea or Ms. Driscoll, has this issue been raised before the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management as part of the water quality review?
I haven't reviewed the water quality review myself. I just reviewed the data that was collected, just the concentration. So I haven't looked at the water quality report.
Okay. Mr. Shea, anything different? I don't know what interaction you've had with RIDEM on this issue.
I have not had any individual action with RIDEM on this issue.
Okay.
Just to, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You're going to conclude? Okay.
Well, I just wanted to clarify a point and make sure. Dr. Driscoll, is it your opinion that further testing is recommended with respect to this very, very powerful toxin TBT?
Yes, it is. It is my opinion that more testing needs to be done. Specifically, you need both the TBT concentration and the organic carbon content of the sediments. And I think maybe more sampling in the area. My understanding was that the boatyard collected a sample in the same vicinity a year previous to the sample that was collected by the Dumplings Association, but that sample was not analyzed for TBT. So I'm not clear about how many samples have actually been analyzed for TBT other than the 2 that were collected and analyzed by the Dumplings Association.
In your opinion, without this further testing, is it possible to accurately predict what the effect might be of dredging with TBT in this location and the amounts that you found?
I think without the organic carbon content information, it's not possible to predict what the adverse impact of the TBT concentrations might be. And also, I would think you just need more data on concentrations of TBT in general in that vicinity rather than just the one sample. And also not a full 3-foot core, which I would think has some potential for diluting maximum concentrations.
But we do know that TBT is an extremely toxic substance.
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Just one follow-up question, Ms. Driscoll, and rendering your conclusion on what you believe is a necessity for further testing. Did you refer to any state standards that would influence your conclusion?
No, I looked at the national ambient water quality criteria. I did not look at the Rhode Island water quality criteria. And my understanding is that there's no sediment quality criteria for the state, or there's no national national sediment quality criteria for tributyl tin, but there may be regional criteria for sediment.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Driscoll? Okay.
May I ask one question? Is it time to count? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think Mr. Longo, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, we are not, it was not the council's intent to allow cross-examination of witnesses because this is not a full-blown contested case. It's a disputed case, but it's not a contested case. So if you had questions, usually you could direct them through the chair, but just please don't abuse that opportunity to cross-examine through.
My
through the
apologies.
chair.
I thought we were, I provided the ability to cross-examine.
Not today.
Yeah, again, you'll have an opportunity when you rebut what's being argued and presented as way a testimony. And if there's an actual question that you would like answered, perhaps we can field it through the council.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, back to you, Mr. Shea. You have a second witness?
I do. Thank you, Dr. Driscoll. Yes, Madam Chair, we would like to call Dr. Marie-Helene Cormier, a marine geophysicist, if the moderator can successfully admit the doctor.
I'm just trying to find her for one moment. We have 130 people in here. What's that again?
Hello?
Oh, there she is.
No.
Okay, we see you, Ms. Cormier.
Yes. Okay, my name is Marie-Helene Cormier, and I'm a Jamestown resident.
Okay,
and I'm
before you begin, I'm going to swear you in.
Oh, yes.
Okay, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Marie-Helene Cormier. I'm a Jamestown resident, and I'm a research scientist with an expertise in marine geophysics. I just retired as an associate marine research scientist from URI, the Graduate School of Oceanography. My education is I had an engineering degree in applied geophysics from France, a master's of science in oceanography from University of Rhode Island, and a PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara. I also worked a few years for the Royal Dutch Shell in the Netherlands, and as a research scientist at Columbia University.
Please, I need you to repeat it. I didn't get it.
Yeah, so
excuse me, Ms. Cormier. I think our stenographer needed you to repeat something that she didn't get. Cindy, can you indicate what you need?
She said I also worked for, and then I didn't get it.
Oh, the in all industry for Shell in the Netherlands of just less than 3 years. So I apply various techniques to assess how the seafloor is changing, or the processes that may affect the morphology of the seafloor. So when I was asked to evaluate the marine geology aspect of this application, here are my assessment. Looking at satellite imagery, documents that a local current in Dumpling Cove results in a net sediment transport from northwest to southeast, as is evidenced by the greater width of the beach north of the two existing piers, and conversely, their narrow width south of these piers. Sediments are therefore actively transported and redeposited by local currents in this shallow cove. Also, sailing enthusiasts have mentioned to me that they have experienced very strong tidal currents, possibly 1 knot, which were hard to beat with a sailboat, when these currents funnel just landward of the rocky outcrops in Dumpling Cove.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with your accent a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I should.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll speak slower. So I start again. Sediment are therefore actively transported and redeposited by local currents in this shallow cove. Sailing enthusiasts have also mentioned to me having experienced strong tidal currents, possibly as high as 1 knot, where they funnel just landward of the rocky outcrop in Dumpling Cove and close to the area of the proposed marina expansion. So sediment in the deeper area might be remobilized by such strong currents. So these two observations suggest that dredging might be required on a regular basis to maintain a 10-feet depth in the proposed dredging area. So there are several environmental concerns regarding an introduction of dredging activity in the cove. The newly dredged area may end up trapping remobilized sediments and thus negatively impacts the natural sand replenishment of the beach. It is also possible that the introduction of dredging in this area would damage existing eelgrass beds, an essential habitat for many marine species. Although the proposed dredging area narrowly avoids encroaching on existing eelgrass beds, the sedimentary suspension that would result from a combined increase in dredging activity and yachting activity is likely to reduce water clarity, which would inhibit eelgrass photosynthesis. Furthermore, the resuspension of the sediments in the proposed dredging area may lead to their redeposition on adjacent eelgrass beds, which would contribute to their smothering. So in view of these uncertainties regarding siltation rates that may result from local currents, it would seem important to me to determine both the local sediment sources and to quantify sedimentation rates across the Dumpling Cove, something that would be best achieved with a collection and analysis of a series of sediment cores. The cores then could be dated, I mean, sedimentation rates can be dated with radioisotopic methods, and that may provide answers in regard to all these uncertainties. I hope you could follow me despite my French accent.
Yeah, no, I could understand you. Thank you. Cindy, did you get what you needed?
I did, thank you.
Madam Chair, Dr. Cormier has actually reduced her statement to a written statement, which Ms. Turner asked if it would be available. We would both be glad to present that if we have not done so already. I think it may have be in the CRMC file from a prior submission, but we would be delighted to present that if that is of assistance to the council or the stenographer.
It probably would be of assistance to our stenographer. So.
Okay. I'd be glad to submit that.
Okay, thank you.
At your convenience.
Are you asking any questions of Dr. Cormier, or is it open for questions now?
It's open for questions.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Cormier, I'll ask you what I asked Ms. Driscoll in rendering your conclusion and doing your analysis. Did you refer to any state standards that are applicable? Huh?
No, I haven't. It's a qualitative assessment. And I think to put numbers on that would require sample analysis. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Are there other questions for Dr. Cormier from council members? Okay, I don't see any. Anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Your Honor. Someday.
Not in my lifetime. All right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Cormier.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I don't know if this is the time to sum up, but
It is.
we do not have any further witnesses here. And just briefly, I think what we see here is we see a woefully deficient application that has been filed. At least 7 reasons why the requirements of the application process have not been met by the applicant here. And it's important to note that the objectors have no burden here. The applicant has the entire burden of convincing this council that it has met all the requirements and left no questions outstanding here. And here we have questions of the actual property line itself and the original perimeter, marina perimeter determination, municipal requirements that have not been met. There is safety issues which remain unsatisfied. And we've got environmental issues which have done nothing but raise questions but have not answered them. At best, this application is highly premature, and the applicant has not met the requirements of the Red Book that it needs to meet in order to obtain the type of assent that it's looking for before this council. Too many unanswered questions remain here, and I believe this council should not act at this point until such time as those questions are answered. I know I would just like to state that if the CRMC records are reviewed, the sediment samples that were taken by the objectors were taken inside the dredging footprint. I believe it was remarked earlier that that was not the case. Hundreds of people have signed a petition asserting that this proposal before the CRMC is in no way a benefit to them, the recreational boating activities, or to the town of Jamestown as a whole. Is it instead widely viewed as a detrimental plan that benefits only Safe Harbors, Jamestown Marina, and I would urge this council to deny the application as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Do any council members have questions for Mr. Shea about any of his arguments made or the basis for any of those arguments? I'd just like to address the property issue that you raised. The council doesn't have jurisdiction to make determinations on property ownership. That's the agency has taken the position for quite a long time, and it's supported by case law that the Superior Court is the one vested with that jurisdiction, not the agency. I guess it's different if there's a pending Superior Court action when then an application comes before us that we would maybe have to pause or not proceed to a decision. So I'll ask you if there is a pending Superior Court action that's been initiated by you or anyone else related to property ownership.
To my knowledge, there's not one pending now. I would urge the council to take a quick look at the submissions to see if the site plan that's submitted indicates strong potential for ownership, and ownership being a fundamental issue before someone is granted relief before your council. So no, I don't know of any pending real estate litigation presently, but I would urge the council to look at the submissions that have been made and take that into account here.
Mr. Longo, is there anything you want to add on that?
No, just that you summed it up very well, and our permit doesn't trump anybody's property rights. So if we were to grant this application and then the objectors took it to Superior Court, the applicant couldn't say, well, Coastal said I owned the land. That would be, reviewed by the Superior Court.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's several arguments like this, Mr. Shea, that you raise that I don't think fall within our decision-making authority. That there's some, like the eelgrass impact, and that is something that we should be considering. The classification of the type of waters in the area, and I did read your memo on that, and I've read our deputy director's response to that as part of a different petition that's not before us right now, which we will take up, and we will consider that, what you've put forward in that. But for purposes of this application, we have to assume the type of waters that was when the application was filed, and we can't take into consideration something different. So that's frozen for purposes of this application. But again, it will be taken up when we get to it at our next meeting or whenever it's scheduled. So I don't think that we would be responding to that this evening. And then with respect to, is there anything more on that, Mr. Longo?
No, were you going to address zoning and town parking requirements in the similar vein?
Yeah, that I was going to zoning and compliance and the alleged violations raised. Again, I think that's non-jurisdictional, but Mr. Longo, your counsel, so I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah, so the council requires applicants to have their necessary local permits, not because we second guess them, but so we don't spin our wheels with theoretical applications that are never going to go anywhere. Whether or not the applicant is in violation of his zoning stipulations, that's really beyond the scope of your review in this case. That is something that can be adjudicated by the zoning board. We have jurisdiction of anything in the water. The town has jurisdiction of the uplands. So if it meets our parking requirements, our marina parking requirements, that's good enough. We generally don't get into whether or not it's in violation of a local zoning or a local town parking ordinance. And that issue was litigated out on Block Island, where the town tried to intrude on our ability to permit marinas, and we were successful in that.
Thank you, Mr. Longo. I would urge the council to take a look at the attendant safety issues that involve the local waters, such as the ability of first responders to get to necessary emergency calls, as well as the actual safety conditions on the water itself. And I think that even bringing up these parking issues, though not directly under CRMC jurisdiction as far as you're being able to cite for zoning violations, I think they're very important considerations in your overall view of what this application will entail. And Madam Chair, I surely understand your statement with respect to the water classification issues. However, just as with Superior Court, I would ask the council to take what we call in other forums and judicial notice of something that is pending before the council when you go to make this determination in your discretion.
And then the last point I wanted to make on your arguments, you talked about the adverse scenic impact. And my question really is for Mr. Goulet. Is that criterion part of what would be a category B application?
Yes, Madam Chair, although it is in our standards, but there are no measurable standards. And so staff typically will leave that to the council to determine, but it is part of the category B, and this would be considered a marina maintenance for the docks.
Okay, so is it part of a category A application?
I don't.
That's just a question I have, and maybe Mr. Longo can look at that, because I know we've talked about it came in as category B.
Yep.
Essentially got transformed into a category A, and I just.
So, yeah, Madam Chair, I could address
Yes.
that. It
Thank
kind
you.
of comes in, it kind of comes in through the back door. On a category A, we've got to determine that it meets our goals, policies, prerequisites, and standards. We require applicants to address visual impacts so the council can evaluate them. But then when you go to see, well, what is the standard for visual impacts? There aren't standards. There are guidelines that you can consider. But it is not it's a guideline. It's not a prerequisite or standard.
And Mr. Shea, what are you contending is the scenic impact?
Just increased use of marine traffic in the area. Absolutely pristine and beautiful area. I think if the area is viewed, our submissions have some very colorful illustrations in them. And I think if the council takes a look at that and then can take notice of the fact that it is a very compressed and dense area there, that the addition of larger vessels, yachts, and more vessel repair work in the area could have a detrimental effect on what is absolutely a spectacular and scenic overlook for Rhode Islanders.
Okay, so it's not the piers themselves, it's what will come as a result of the expansion of the piers.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Shea from council members before I turn it back over to Christian? Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and the council for listening to us this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Okay, back to you, Christian. Do you want to respond?
Madam Chair, I'd like to reserve my response until we hear from all the objectors. We do, apparently there's going to be a list of others that are going to be there, and in order to effectively respond, I would like to reserve my right to summate at the end of the hearing, please.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think we've come to the point where if there's no questions from council members on what's been presented so far, that we can, that we would open up the meeting to public comment. And, we know at least that we have Mr. Landry's organized group of 26 people who would like to spend 1 or 2 minutes addressing their personal observations of the area. And then we may have an additional 16, or maybe that's subsumed within the 26. But I think what I would like now, before we take a 10-minute break, is for anyone who wants to speak as part of the public comment period, put up your virtual hand so it can be counted by our moderator, Mr. Moore, and then we can have a count and then figure out how we get between 7:49, or we'll come back about 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock.
Madam Chair, could I just tell people how to raise their hand in case there's a doubt? If you move your mouse over everybody's picture, that'll bring up a little menu down the bottom, and then you click on participants, and then that's where the raise your hand option lives.
Yes, Madam Chair, I already have been taking hands down that I've been putting them up and making a list.
Okay.
Now everyone's putting their hands back up. I'm gonna have to go through the list again.
Sorry, I screwed you up.
That's okay. Just a note to everybody that's got their hand up, can you please provide your last name as well, instead of just your first names? Thank you.
Are you still counting, Ryan?
Madam Chair, we have 26 that want to speak, and that's both Mr. Landry's list that he combined and the list of names that were not on his list. So it's 26 altogether.
Okay, because he had a list of 26, so,
Not all of them have raised their hand.
okay. All right. I'll just ask Mr. Landry if that is correct, that not all of the people on your list will be speaking.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
I can, yes.
Yeah, no, we do expect the people on our list to be speaking. I think there may have been some confusion on their part that they didn't either put their name in the chat or maybe not raise their hand, thinking that we'd work from the list and recognize them from the list. So I'd like to make sure everybody that is on that list of the 25 people that we're expecting to speak, they should raise their hand now, and perhaps Brian could repeat the instructions for raising the hand. I'm a little concerned some of those people think they may be called upon because they're on the list that had been provided.
Okay.
We can go through that list as well. That's not a big deal.
Thank you.
We have both here.
And
so-
also, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I had expected to be given the opportunity to make some remarks also as counsel for, that was introduced at the outset before we go to the public comment period.
Oh, okay, and you will be making the comments on behalf of your group or not?
On behalf of my client, Friends of Dumplings Cove, not all of the members of most of the members of the public are not specifically part of that.
Okay. All right, so then we should have you present what you want to present before we would break for 10 minutes and then come back with the public comment period.
Okay.
But let's just make sure that Ryan has what he needs before we do that.
I am all set and ready to continue.
Okay, so what is your count, Ryan?
Mr. Landry submitted 25 names. All 25 are on my list. And then I think we have one more. So we're ready to go.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay, Mr. Landry, do you want to put your video on and make your presentation?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the council, as I indicated, I do represent the Friends of Dumplings Cove. It's a group that exists to protect the recreational and environmental and scenic values of Dumplings Cove. Its origin was in an effort to raise awareness of this application by Jamestown Boatyard that resulted in over 500 people subscribing to a petition in opposition to the application for various reasons as it proceeded. And that's an extraordinary number in view of the fact that Jamestown has only about 2,300 households altogether. The Jamestown folks know their island. They know boating. They intimately know Dumplings Cove. They know its extraordinary features, the ones that it shares with the rest of the state, including its recreational, historic, scenic, ecological, and environmental values. And they also know its extraordinary limitations. It's being hemmed in by the rock formations that give it its character. What was described in the CRMC staff report, the cove was described, and I'm quoting, a tight, well-used area. It's also one that has already become outright dangerous in view of the multiple competing recreational and commercial activities that take place within it. The sailing, the swimming, the kayaking, the youth group sailboat lessons, windsurfing, children's activities, fishing, commercial activity, boats from distant places rafting up on and near the shore for extensive periods of time, boats moored almost everywhere, increasing significantly in recent years as the town has expanded the number of mooring permits. These boats being accessed by small craft. The danger of submerged rocks that are a hazard to the inexperienced visitor. And the rocks inside the more prominent Dumplings rock formations. They lurk everywhere, alongside the risk and danger of collision by users with other users of that same area. Before I yield to the public comment portion in which those issues will be accentuated, I'd like to address briefly a few legal and process points of overarching concern to the residents. We share the alarm of Mr. Shea's clients at the lack of clarity and record on the riparian setback requirement. And we're not just talking about property rights here, we're talking about the basic requirement that consent be procured from property owners within the within the side setback of a riparian line. And we're dumbfounded, frankly, that during the course of this application, the applicant itself presented a plan showing a riparian line running right through the docks. So this extension area that they're applying for now would obviously fall within the riparian area under that plan that they presented. Respectfully, the council should not consider any further expansion of the boatyard without that issue being sorted out. It's the applicant's burden to do that. And we're aware that the second thing is we're aware that the waters of the boatyard are type 3 waters and that there are aspirations in the CRMC regulatory program for recreational boating in type 3 waters. We also know that that's not going to change for purposes of this application because that's the water type that was in place at the time the application was filed. But not all type 3 waters are the same. If they were, there'd be no need for the council to conduct hearings like this. The unique, overused, overutilized, congested, hemmed-in nature of the cove is paramount in this regard. And it cries out for the balance that the CRMC regulatory program is looking for in these types of applications. And you'll hear, I believe, in the public comment period, that balance has already reached a tipping point, even without this application. Next, the point has been made that JBY is really not proposing more boats and that the expansion is really benign as the application has been amended. But the application still clearly proposes a change in the already stressed conditions that exist there today. It proposes dredging that would permit bigger boats to be able to go into places where they are not able to go into right now. I listened to what Mr. DeVoe stated, and frankly, it strains credibility to suggest that this is not going to result in bigger boats going where they were not able to go before, for whatever purposes. The application itself, you'll see, describes that one of the reasons for all of this is that the market is changing and there's more of a desire for large boats in the 70-foot area, and that the boatyard would like to accommodate those boats, and we can all easily imagine why. There's more money in bigger boats. So the suggestion that this is not about bigger boats moving in areas where they're not moving right now is quite frankly preposterous. Finally, the congestion issue doesn't just involve the water-based activities here, but also to some extent the land-based activities. And I'm not talking about zoning or any type of zoning requirements. The marina standards themselves, as Mr. Longo has noted, have their own requirements in terms of parking. And it's 1.5 parking spaces per boat, and each parking space has to be 300 square feet. Now, when the marine perimeter limit was established back in 1993, there were only 54 boats that were part of that undertaking. And we've heard Mr. DeVoe say that they're up to 84 now. So there's been nothing presented as part of this record or as part of the file, as we have been able to determine, that shows that the boatyard meets that standard. And that's a CRMC standard, it's not a zoning standard. And that's their burden to establish that, and they have not done so. And at this point, Madam Chair, I would yield beyond what I've presented to the public comment portion of the proceedings and appreciate the moderator's efforts here to try to ensure that the people on our list are given an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Landry, your group of people will speak from their own personal knowledge, so you're not representing them individually, you're representing the friends of the.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Goulet, did you want to comment on the CRMC parking requirement, that the issue that was raised by Mr. Landry, that he questions whether or not that standard has been met? You're on mute.
Certainly, Madam Chair. This application before the council now doesn't modify the marina perimeter limit, nor will it modify the boat count. So therefore, parking does not come up as part of this review. If they had moved if they had adjusted the parking, the marina perimeter limit, or were proposing slips that would have been utilized as dockage, then we would have had to review the parking. But it's not part of this review.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so any other council members want to ask questions of Mr. Landry? Okay, if none, then I would like to, we have 27 people who want to speak in the public comment period. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And so let's say we'll come back at 8:20, and then we'll start working through the list. And Ryan, I think I'll ask you when we come back for you to read off people's names. So you're going to be in control of identifying the people and putting on their video, and then they'll speak. And we'll figure out if we need to have a time limit during the break, but you're going to be in charge of going through that list.
Okay, sounds good. I have the list ready here, and when we come back, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so we'll come back on the record at 8:20. Thank you. We'll wait for him to come back to his monitor.
Don Gomez, what's for dinner?
He's on mute.
I think the pizza guy forgot my address.
Oh, yeah. All right. I guess we're getting hungry. All right. Cindy, are we okay to go back on?
Already.
Okay, thank you. All right, back on the record. So we concluded at our before the break with comments from Mr. Landry, and we determined that there were approximately 27 people who want to speak in the public comment period. Mr. Landry indicated that the people on his list, the other 25 or 26, are going to speak to their personal observations. And that's what I would emphasize, that you speak to your personal knowledge of the area, of the marina, of the piers, and what you do in that area, and not talk about other people, your personal knowledge. And try not to repeat what's already been said as far as argument. You've heard the arguments. I don't think they need to be reiterated, and we're just really interested in your personal experiences and knowledge. So with that, we're thinking that we would give up to, we'd like to keep your comments up to 3 minutes, so no more than 3 minutes, so that we can get through the large number of people that want to speak. We likely will not make it by 9 to conclude, and will likely have to continue to another date. If we do continue to another date, it will be to our next meeting, which is October 27th. I mean, we'll have to move for that, but that's going to be my recommendation to the rest of the council. And in view of that, if there's anyone who wants to speak who might not be available for the 27th, please indicate that in the chat box to our moderator so that we can try to get you on tonight so that you have an opportunity. If we need to go into another meeting, it's not going to be another chance for a new group of people to speak. It's going to be, whoever has indicated tonight that they want to speak, that's going to be the group and no more. And then if we need to finish up with public comment on the 27th, we'll then go back to applicants council for any rebuttal, and then we would conclude with the council deliberations and vote. So with that, I'm going to ask Ryan if he would call the first on the list. And again, if anyone indicates to you, Ryan, that they will not be available on October 27th, please put them in priority.
Will do, Madam Chair. Thank you. Our first one is Corey, and I believe she's already online, ready to go.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Corey Sertle. My parents bought the property on 34 Dumplings Drive in the early 60s from Charlie Wharton and Build a House. I am the current owner of the property, one house away from Jamestown Boatyard, and have spent a lifetime of summers sailing, paddleboarding, and swimming in the Dumplings area. My sailing experience includes being an Olympian and a 2-time Rolex Yachtswoman of the Year, and I continue to actively race and enjoy sailing on Narragansett Bay. I have watched the activity level grow over the years and have a front row seat observing sailboats and powerboats navigating to and from the dock and through the mooring field. The area between the end of the JBY dock and the nearest dumpling is already congested and challenging for boaters to weave their way through. Extending the dock and adding more boats to that area will preclude easy access to the dock and moorings. Having a boatyard as a neighbor has been a unique feature in living in the Jamestown community. I believe the boatyard is already above the size limit for the neighborhood and safe enjoyment of boating by all constituents. I oppose the Safe Harbor, JBY's, dredging and dock increase proposals and fervently request the CRMC commissioners to the proposal in its entirety. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Corey. Ryan?
Yes. Next, we have Hannah Sweat.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted, but my picture.
Yeah, do you have a video? We have a picture of you.
There we go.
Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for letting us speak. My name is Hannah Sweat. My family has been coming to Jamestown for many generations, and myself for 5 decades, always around the Dumpling area. I'm also a mother of 2 who recently moved to Jamestown full-time. I'm a very experienced sailor of all types of watercraft, sail and motor, and I've been on the water around the Dumplings areas for those same 5 decades. For 5 years, I kept my motorboat at JBY, now Safe Harbor. This area is very complex to navigate as it is crowded with natural obstructions and filled with boats, even in its current use and configuration. There is no natural channel, and therefore boats navigate at will, creating a dangerous waterway. We used to swim from our family's house to Dumplings, paddleboard from the Dumplings beach, and generally swim in the area. From a family point of view, there is no question any expansion of the size under discussion will reduce safety on many levels. From a boater user point of view, more and bigger boats will increase the potential for accidents on the water. Navigating at will by an increased volume of boats unfamiliar to an area greatly impacted by tide, current, and wind direction will only have a negative impact on the safety of current users of the Dumplings. Please do not allow any expansion of the Safe Harbor boat yard in Jamestown or any dredging. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Ryan?
Ben Tough is next.
Thank you very much for listening to all of us. And over the past 40 years, I've watched the shore of Jamestown transform from a small hub for recreational sailors and boaters to moor their boats to a nearly impassable harbor full of itinerant motorists. Connecticut Marina and East Ferry went from a town dock dominated from the local lobstermen to a metropolis of yachts and recreational vessels. One needs look no further than that to see the environmental and recreational impact that results from building out a pier. As a kid, I used to catch bluefish, fluke, stripers, and tautog from the end of that pier, but those days are over, and today one's lucky to even catch the odd scup from the end of the pier. As an avid fisherman and swimmer, I've become very much attuned to the marine environment in our precious nook of Narragansett Bay. However, the days of my swimming from Cottrell Pier to Dumplings Cove are over with the increased traffic and size of boats at Safe Harbor Jamestown Boatyard. Should this company be allowed to build out further, not only will this decimate what is left of our stripers' feeding grounds, but it would also make the area impossible to swim, paddle, fish, and with its larger boats, make it much less maneuverable from a swimming point of view. Last year, I swam the entirety of Connecticut Island, all 23 miles, to raise funds for Clean Ocean Access, the environmental group. As I prepare to attempt my swim from Block Island to Beavertail next summer, I feel much safer in the open ocean out there than I do in the busy mooring field just in front of our own homes and beaches. That is not right. To allow such a project to take place in such a delicate environment would be a travesty solely to line the pockets of Safe Harbor or whoever they just got bought out by. Let the large boats find a home in Newport. Let's protect what little ocean we have left from getting demolished. Respectfully, commissioners, please reject this proposal in its entirety.
Thank you, Ben.
Next, we have Dennis Dowling.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great. Madam Chair and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Dennis Dowling. My wife, Allison, and I own and operate a boutique charter business based in the Dumplings with our 1957 classic sailing yacht, Mr. Badger. I've been a professional yacht captain for 14 years. In that time, I've accrued over 100,000 nautical miles and had the pleasure of visiting some of the most beautiful cruising grounds in the world. Many of these places hold sites of incredible natural beauty. I've watched over time as some of these magical coves and natural wonders have been developed and exploited for profit. There are others which remain pure and untainted, where nature is allowed to be natural and the local people understand what they have and work to protect it and share it in a responsible way. As both a patron of Safe Harbor Marinas and a friend of many of the Dumplings Association members, I believe that I can speak from an unbiased perspective. At least 4 other safe harbor properties are already equipped and better positioned to serve deep draft large vessels within 15 nautical miles of the Dumplings Cove, any of which I would look to for the service of vessels under my management that cannot safely enter Safe Harbor Jamestown Boatyard in its current form. From a financial perspective alone, the corporate entity should have zero interest in investing its considerable resources into the destruction of such a treasured natural place, for any profit to be gained is already theirs for the taking through these other nearby facilities. To inflict these unnecessary scars upon such a special corner of the Narragansett Bay would be to join a growing list of lost wonders without reason. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis.
Next, we have Paula Sheldon.
Am I on?
You are.
Hi. Thank you for having me testify earlier in the evening. I'm a nurse and I'll be at work at your next meeting. My name is Paula Shevlin. I've lived and raised my family in the Dumplings area of Jamestown for over 20 years. I will share 2 examples of why I strenuously object to any further expansion of the boatyard. On Friday, August 28th, 2020, this past August, while sitting at the end of the Dumpling Dock, enjoying a warm, sunny afternoon, I witnessed an accident involving a paddleboard and a motor yacht a short distance from the JBY dock. A beautifully restored antique Chris craft was slowly approaching the far side of the JBY dock, and the JBY launch was turning right into the mooring field. At the same time, a young man on a paddleboard was turning left parallel to the shoreline, just past the Dumpling swim line. The operator of the Chris craft bumped into the paddleboard, throwing the young man off the board and into the water. Hand gestures displayed this young man's horror and understandable anger. By good fortune, no one was injured this time. Each of the 3 operators of these particular watercraft appeared to be seasoned boaters, but often throughout the summer, there are novice boaters, inexperienced kayakers, and persons of all ages learning the skill of the paddleboard, all in the already congested area from the Roundhouse to Clingstone. This summer has brought many more people in search of relaxation and a peaceful time on the bay to avert the anxiety of these trying times. Often the waters have been overcrowded. Thank goodness this accident involved a young, healthy man and not one of the many children or senior citizens who are honing their skills in the gentle waters of the Dumplings area. The safety of all is at stake with any further expansion by the boatyard. The second incident I have to bring attention to please recognize the decision you make not only impacts what happens on the water, they also directly affect what happens on the land. If allowed to expand, all of the traffic noise and pollutants that come with the working boatyard will follow. I was in a near-miss accident on July 4th weekend of this past summer. As I was driving down for a swim between 5 and 6 p.m., I drive down Newport Street, slowly round the curve, which is often congested. It's difficult throughout the summer to navigate, even in my small, old Saab, due to the ever-increasing size and number of parked cars and trucks, and made even more perilous with a ditch and sewer grate in the road. While I was driving down there, I was alarmed by the beeping of an ambulance as it tried to back out of the Dumpling Association parking lot. As a registered nurse, I fully realized the importance seconds play in an emergency situation. I needed to get out of the way of the rescue team as quickly as possible. So I made a sharp turn to the left to avoid the ambulance. Went into the deep hole, hit orange cone, which had been placed by the JY to barricade their parking area. To try and make room for the rescue vehicle to make its turn up Racket Road, I continued into the JBY lot, dragging what I thought was now my muffler, which I feared had dropped from the impact of the ditch. The ambulance was able to complete its turn and proceed to Newport Hospital. One of the Jamestown Fire Department volunteers spent some time removing the orange cone from underneath my car. He reassured me that I had acted prudently and appreciated how difficult it was to navigate this tight road. Fortunately, no damage was done to the car. I, however, was very shaken by this incident, but grateful that the ambulance was able to proceed to the hospital in a timely manner. In closing, the increased number and size of cars parking on this roadway is already an impediment to all traffic, especially to emergency fire and rescue vehicles. Any further expansion will only exacerbate the dangerous situation which exists.
Thank you, Paula.
Next is Chad George.
I'm trying to get my video going. You can't start. Oh, start my video. Here we go. Okay, thank you very much. My name's Chad George. I'm a relative newcomer. Since 2014, my wife Nancy and I have lived up the street from JBY. What first brought us to the area was our sailboat. We have a Swan 59, and in 2005, we brought it to the Jamestown area. And because JBY was the Swan authorized service location, we started using them. We were assigned a mooring. We had a lot of work done there, and we also kept it there one winter. When we were at the mooring, honestly, it was always stressful. The boat's 60 feet long, 16 feet, width, and draws 8 feet. And between the rocks, all the moorings, the other things that have been mentioned, always stressful bringing the boat in and out to that mooring. In the last 15 years, we've had the boat at Connecticut Marina and at Clark Marina boatyard. And honestly, I've never had any stress bringing the boat in and out of either of those locations. But JBY, 60-foot boat, just too big for that location, just didn't feel right. Just as important, I have 3 grandchildren, 5 years old and younger, who join us for the summer from the UK. And we love to swim together there. And it's a big adventure to swim to the dock, but then to go under the mooring, the buoy line and swim to the beach where the rest of our family will be waiting. And it is very stressful swimming in there between the launches coming in and out, small boats. It's just a very concerning area. I'm always looking to see, has a guy driving the boat, has he seen my eyes? Has he recognized me in there? It's a tight area. And one thing I forgot to mention on our boat too, when boats get bigger, the freeboards get bigger. We have 4 feet of freeboard on ours. Aft cockpit, 60 feet of boat in front of you, 4 feet above the water. You really can't see anybody down on the water. And if there's a little bit of chop, it does get dangerous. So just in closing, from my view, JBY just isn't configured in that cove to have boats bigger than 35, 40 feet at the most. That's probably what it was designed for. That's probably what it was in there for. When our boat was built in the late 80s, you know, a 60-foot boat was near the top of the line of the swan line. Now we're in the middle. They make boats twice as big. You know, I understand that the market has gotten bigger for boats, but there's better places for large boats to go. That's where I go with our boats, you know, and have it serviced at a place that's appropriate for that size boat. And obviously, we're against the proposal by JBY Safe Harbor to extend the dock, and thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Next is Kim Westcott.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for your time. My name is Kim Westcott. My family and I live in the Racket Road area of Jamestown. I enjoy observing nature on land and on the water along Racket Road and Dumpling Drive around to Fort Wetherill. Observing the migratory cycle of birds is a particular love of mine. From May through October, I launch my kayak from just north of Clark's Boatyard and paddle peacefully along the shoreline past Laurie Point, observing the nesting cormorants on the near dumplings, and as the season progresses, oyster catchers and common terns building and guarding their nests. I can hear the distinctive calls of the prairie warblers in the trees along Bull Point. I often lay down my paddle and drift so I can look through my binoculars to see these birds. I report my findings to eBird online database, and the National Audubon Society issues guidelines that strongly advises ethical birding, staying far enough away from birds so as not to disturb them. So I keep a good buffer between me and the dumplings. I have one eye on the nesting birds and another on watercraft. I'm careful, but I'm probably a bit distracted too. It's a narrow, rock-laden area and perfect for a kayak to gunk hole. I fear that further narrowing the passageway and blocking sight lines with additional dockage will make this area more dangerous for me to kayak. This is a plea on behalf of all kayakers, SUP users, rowers, to not further congest this beautiful area rich with natural wildlife, with more moorings, high freeboard luxury yachts, increased launch service, and transiting vessels. On land, I bird Racket Road, which surrounds the Rhode Island Audubon's Bird Sanctuary, a very rich habitat for migrating birds. I fear increased morning traffic on the south side of Racket Road where I walk. I keep a wary eye on the many pickup trucks and cars transiting the blind curves of the area. While vehicular traffic is not the purview of CRMC, expansion and improvements on the waterfront will invariably lead to more traffic on Racket Road, which has historically been an extremely peaceful, quiet, and unspoiled space. The Dumplings area still maintains a rural feel and looks very much as it has since my childhood. We must protect and preserve this fragile habitat from overuse and misuse. It would be a tragedy to stand by and watch it become overdeveloped. Thank you very much.
Next we have William Hutchinson.
Hi there. Am I visible and listenable?
You are.
Okay, excellent. My name is William Hutchinson, and I am representing my family who have had the privilege of living in the Dumplings area for over 100 years. We own the property that's not directly adjacent to JBY, but is just down the way and includes several hundred feet of beach frontage that looks out over the mooring field. I want to give a historical note to things. You know, the boatyard was originally built there literally to build the neighborhood and serve the neighborhood. Literally, there wasn't even a road out there. I've grown up in that along that beach and down at the boatyard when it was called Wharton's, and I've just spent so much time there along with my kids and like many other people you've heard. So the boatyard's kind of in my blood, and I love the place, and I have huge respect for the people who work there, and some of the people who work there are some of the best people in the world. I really feel that way. but there are some serious considerations, and it's about balance in my mind. And one of the things that I've been able to observe by spending tons of time down on that beach is how busy it has gotten. And literally over the last couple of years, things have become progressively busier. This beach, which is beautiful, doesn't have any public access. So it's not frequented by that many people. It has been frequented by dumplings folks, and it is accessible by boat. And I'm a huge person in favor of the everything below high tide line is open public access. And the beach has been a really beautiful retreat because it's had very low traffic. In recent years, the amount of trespass across my family's private property, as well as across the private property of the dumplings to access this beach, has gone up considerably. My daughter, who's been down at the dumplings being the lifeguard down there, has had to confront people coming across the dumplings land, accessing that beach. Most people come by boat, and there's some people who've been coming by boat there for years. And again, it's obviously just an unbelievably gorgeous, lovely spot. This year, the boat traffic was crazy. I mean, crazy. Sometimes as much as 6 boats rafted up. There was one day on the beach where there were 35, 40 people on the beach. I actually had to ask them to move because I was going down there to enjoy with some invited guests an evening cookout. So it's the traffic in both in terms of on the beach and in the recreational use of that space has literally just gone crazy over, it's been progressing, and more recently it's just really accelerated. So the safety aspect that has already been alluded to is a huge piece of this. And I just can't stress it enough. I'm also concerned about the dredging. And I would invite any of you down there just to come and hang out for a little bit, but particularly during a nor'easter, that place gets pounded. And so whatever dredging gets done, they're going to need to do maintenance dredging. Again, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but it would be remarkable to me that the maintenance dredging didn't have to be on a pretty regular schedule to maintain whatever open waterway that they wanted to maintain. I'm just left asking for what? People have already raised that Safe Harbor has plenty of other facilities for larger boats. There's just the scope creep of the size of this facility over time has gotten it out of balance with the neighborhood, and its growth is again, as many people have already said, I can only echo it, that it's already well big enough. And I'd love to add some other things, but I know that we're on a huge schedule here, and I really appreciate you guys' time. I know you're working hard on this, and it's not an easy issue, but and I know that lots of what's said is not in your purview, but I hope that it lends some context to your deliberations over what you do have control over. Thank you.
Thank you, William.
Next, we have Susan Plowden.
Hi, there we go. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Susan Maffei Plowden, and I've lived in Jamestown for almost 40 years. During the entire time, I've been involved in the marine industry. In the past, that's included as a professional sailor with a 100-ton U.S. Coast Guard license, engaged in yacht deliveries and captaining of boats, including in these local waters. And I was a service manager at Jamestown Boatyard during the mid-1980s under prior ownership, so I'm very familiar with the Dumplings area. Then as now, it was tricky to bring boats, particularly in the 60-plus foot range, to the dock or railway, depending on the wind, tide, and current. There was and is no delineated channel. Boats just weave their way through. I also frequent the Dumplings recreationally, either sailing my small sailboat, paddling a kayak or stand-up paddleboard, or just swimming. This cove is one of the most scenic and pristine areas of the bay. But it's concerning as the waterway has become increasingly popular with boaters. On a nice summer day, there's a lot of activity. There's boats motoring to the dock at JBY, kayakers paddling through the JBY launch on regular runs, boats transiting under sail only, and people swimming off their moored boats as well. It's a really busy waterway. All of the activity currently manages to coexist, but oftentimes it's a real safety concern. Sorry, I'm losing my... JBY's proposed dock extension seems to be out of scale and for an already congested area, and will result in a diminished recreational experience for everyone. While it's great so many people are making use of Rhode Island's finest natural resource, which is Narragansett Bay, the nature of these mixed activities in Dumplings Cove and the steadily increasing use should be of great concern to CRMC. I strongly urge CRMC to consider the safety of all stakeholders and the public who use this waterway, and please oppose Safe Harbor Jamestown Boatyard's marina proposal to dredge and expand its docks in its entirety. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susan. So I think we have time for one more public comment, and then we'll talk about a motion to continue this to October 27.
Next, we have Barbie Carton.
Muting myself, and can you see me? Okay, my name is Barbara Wells Carton, and my family has been Dumplings property owners since 1900. We've kept a series of boats at the Dumplings during that time, most recently an old 35-foot yawl. We always sailed to our mooring, but in recent years, this became difficult because of the increasingly overcrowded mooring field. Instead of sailing in, we began having to take the sails down past Clingstone and motor in. We're just lucky that we had a motor that worked usually. Some boats, as you know, don't have reliable motors or any motor at all, sailboats that is. Secondly, I really want to address swimming safety. My 3 daughters and I have always loved swimming from the Dumplings towards town and back. It was easier than it sounds because we'd swim against the tide one way and then just float back the other way. And we'd swim relatively close to shore from one boat to the next. And it was just super fun for all of us and a great family exercise. We're not stupid. We know that swimming, or we knew that swimming through we were swimming through an active waterway. And even though we hugged the shore and kept a constant lookout, it was not without risk. But we took precautions. We wore orange bathing caps and we towed an orange inflatable bubble behind us. We hung on to various mooring lines to wait for any passing traffic if we encountered any, and usually we didn't. But about 2 years ago, we began to notice a lot more motorboat and launch traffic. Some of these boats were quite large and very intimidating, and many traveled quite fast through the Dumplings mooring field and down towards Cottrell Pier. We felt that despite our orange caps and inflatable, the skippers really couldn't see tiny little us in the water, if indeed they were looking ahead, which they often weren't. Sadly, last year we had to give up our swims altogether out of an abundance of caution. Now swimming at the Dumplings is reduced to a small slice of water that makes a dog leg into what's known as the dog beach. One of the things I've always loved about Jamestown, and I've been here both summers and many winters for 70 years, is freedom. The freedom to make your own fun, freedom from team sports and a regimented life, adventure. And this kind of old-fashioned family afternoon was not an exclusive Dumplings thing. I mean, anybody could put in to the water anywhere and do this, put in at the town beach and swim towards Greens Pier or the Dumplings. And not that many years ago, after a great sail and putting our boat to bed on the mooring, we'd always dive off the stern and swim into the beach or the dock. You can't even do that anymore unless your boat is small enough to be so close to the beach that you're not going to run into anybody else. The mooring field stretches way past the Dumplings rocks. The whole thing is just way too scary. And I wonder what happened to our public navigable waters and our shared natural resource. It's for these reasons that any expansion by JBY into this already crowded and dangerous area should not be allowed. Please oppose this proposal in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we are at 9 p.m. So I'd like to ask one of my council members for a motion to continue to October 27 to complete the public comment, which I estimate is about 17 or so. Whoever has identified themselves during this meeting that hasn't spoken will be given an opportunity to speak at a continued meeting. Further, that the applicant's counsel has the opportunity to rebut anything that's been said by other counsel, their experts, or the public. And then finally, for our council deliberate and vote. That was a big motion. So if I can get someone, I'll put forward the motion, and if I could get a second for that.
Madam Chair, Ray Coya seconds your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Any discussion on the motion to continue? Yes, Mr. Gomez, you're muted. You're muted. Mr. Gomez?
Yes.
Okay, did you have anything you wanted to say on the motion?
Yes. The only question I had was we have approximately 17 more speakers. Are we going to hold to those 17, or is it going to be
Yes.
open to more?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's part of my motion, that anyone who identified themselves in this meeting by raising a hand to Ryan, and he's taken up the list, that's going to be the universe of people who can comment during the public comment period, and we will not take new ones at the next continued meeting.
Okay, thank you. I had two mouses here and I was moving the wrong one.
No problem.
It was happening. Well,
Any other discussion on the pending motion? Okay, if none, I'll do a roll call. Ray Koya,
Ray Coya votes aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Patricia Reynolds, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to continue the matter to the October 27th semi-monthly council meeting is approved. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
Hudner, so moved.
Thank you. Second?
Ray Coya seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. I'm just going to ask all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh.
Well, look who's left.